I found from overwhelming experience that a massive amount of people out there are either in denial of what their real level is in the game, what a reasonable assessment of how good they are and how well-rounded they are and which areas they're strong in and their overall level against other people and which results count and which ones are flukes and which anomalies and how good they could be. I found people are not only in denial of it, unable to assess it correctly, but also proud of play that and levels that are way above where they actually are right now and in some sort of delusory fantasy world. One of the things that sparked me to think about this topic was I saw a tweet retweeted by someone else by a guy called Gatsu, Gahtzu, at Gatsu, and he's a German Captain Falco main fighting game player from Super Smash Bros. Melee. And the quote said, "How many times must you lose because of not playing well before you realize your bias memories of peak performances have misled you?" Now, this is a fantastic quote. Has so much within it. It's so evocative. Makes me think of at times myself when I thought of great games I had. I thought, that's how good I could really be. Makes me think of many people I've known. Makes me think of the average kind of consensus and how people talk about themselves and talk up their game and talk up their game knowledge. And even if they can't do it, they think they're better than they are. Let's just think about that for a second. So how many times, like it happens a lot, people, they go through this over and over and over again, they still don't seem to grasp it, they don't seem to learn, they don't seem to make advancement or progress in this particular area of just understanding their level, never mind getting better at the game. How many times must you lose? So when you lose, you get faced with the reality, you've lost. Now, not every game is your fault that you lose, but if you're losing many times, that's reality telling you in some way at this game you're not as good as you think you are. You might be good at this area. Maybe you're not well-rounded enough. Therefore, you're not winning the games. It doesn't matter that you think, well, my micro is better than his micro. I'm betting him. No, maybe there's something else about the other person or the other team as to why they're better than you. They beat you. Even if in that one area of, say, micro, for example, you're better in some way. So how many times must you lose because of not playing well? The reason that's in inverted commas is because that's the excuse you say, I was not playing well. Maybe you were playing your normal level. Maybe sometimes when you are playing well, that's actually above your level. That's the rare occasion when it's the right opponent, he makes mistakes. You just happen to not make any mistakes in this particular game. You get lucky. You have a little streak of form. You feel unduly confident that day. You don't have any stresses, whatever it might be. Okay, before you realize... Now, he put bias, but he's from Germany. He means biased. Before you realize your biased memories, so you're selective in your memories. You delete the ones that you don't like, or you make up excuses. Therefore, you can delete them, or you can discount them, or you say, I don't need to count. That's not my real level. Your biased memories of peak performances, your best ever performances where everything does go right, where it's the right sort of opponent, where everything's perfect. Your biased memories have misled you. Because if you're assigning that to be your true level, then you're going to be misled. You're going to be delusional. And we don't mean that as in you're mad. We just mean that you're allowing yourself to enter a state of delusion. You're allowed to enter this little bubble where any facts you don't like that disagree with what you think your real level is, you find a way to discount them, or you flat out ignore them, or you're afraid of them, and you just don't even think about them. Now, one of the most famous ways of describing this sort of a problem is what many people will have heard of. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And here's the Wikipedia entry for that. It explains it very simply. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias in which relatively unskilled persons suffer illusory superiority, mistakenly assessing their ability to be much higher than it really is. Dunning and Kruger attributed this bias to a metacognitive inability of the unskilled to recognize their own ineptitude and evaluate their own ability accurately. Their research also suggests corollaries. Highly skilled individuals may underestimate their relative competence and may erroneously assume that tasks which are easy for them are also easy for others. So the key aspect here is for unskilled people. Now, immediately there's going to be people who are unskilled, who are not that good at games, who aren't in the top 5% of players in the world, who are going to, I'm not unskilled, I'm skilled, I'm a good player, I'm above average, all these sorts of things. You've already fallen prey to the Dunning-Kruger effect, because very few of the people watching this video right now, in the context of all players in the world, are particularly skilled at these games. So yeah, they're not unskilled as in total scrubs with zero skill, but they're not skilled in the sense that they haven't developed their skills enough that, first of all, they're good at the game or good at whatever they're doing, and certainly not good enough to assess their own level and to assess the level of others reasonably without undue bias or delusion. And so as a result, they'll feel a level of superiority, even over people who actually are better than them at the game, that the results of the game say are better, but they'll find ways And this is why it's illusory to discount that or say they were unlucky or that their peak performance is better than that guy's and he's not as good in this area, therefore he's not as good, and be very selective and they'll be in the state of bias. And also you'll note that it's sort of a corollary, as it mentioned, is that highly skilled individuals actually then go the other way. What happens is they naively think, well, since I've learned this and I understand this, I'm sure many other people understand it. So here's the thing. People live in the context of games in a fantasy realm which is largely populated, sometimes only populated, by the best games they ever played. As in, the best matches they had, the best streaks of form, sometimes not even a game they won. An early point of the game they were doing very well. And their excuses for making mistakes within the game and not playing perfectly, or not playing to that peak level or to whatever their best level was, actually, if you're a third party and you listen to them, will sound quite pathetic and ridiculously subjective. I mean, if you've ever played with someone who thinks they're really good, and you know from their level, from playing them and watching them, they're not that good, and you ask them, well, what were you doing here? Or they criticize someone else for a mistake, and you say, oh yeah, but what about when you did this over here? The excuses they will come up for themselves are so ridiculously favourable to themselves and paint themselves as some mad victim who was just incredibly unlucky and the opponent was very lucky. And then when you ask them about the other person they're criticising, they don't make the same excuses for him. They don't even allow for the same possibility. Because remember, he can't be as good as them. They have to be superior. They are better in some way. And so they just actually, unfortunately, this is why it's quite sad and pathetic, tend to show us lack of self-awareness. Now, these people also, and this may be you, tend to show their insecurity and fear of what their true level might be by ignoring the fundamentals of the game. And so they think, oh, well, those are for beginners, and I've learned that, and I'm already better than that. And besides, that's not the reason I'm losing. I'm not losing because of farming. I'm not losing because of aiming in CS. I'm not losing because of positioning. I'm not losing because of weapon control. I'm not losing because of the champions I play. I'm losing because this guy, he got lucky here, or I was doing the right thing up here, and then I made a mistake here. I wouldn't do that next time. They do it this way. And the reason why they do that is because they have this insecurity, they have this fear. And if they actually practice their fundamentals, they find out how bad they are at the very basic concepts of the game. And if they practice them a lot, it'd be hard work, but they might improve, but they know they only improve a tiny bit at a time, gradually. And so they don't want to deny all this. They want to get a lucky win over someone higher ranked than them. They want to have a moment where something goes right and they say, oh, that's my true level. I was feeling good that game, and I had my coffee, and I didn't have any stress because of homework or school or work or whatever. And so, yeah, in that moment, that was my real level, as opposed to the day-to-day. Your day-to-day games is your real level. The odd day when it goes great and you win all 10 games, that's not your real level. Your day-to-day level is your real level. That's why a lot of the MMR functions in games like League of Legends and CSGO actually try to balance your MMR based on your level. So you're winning something like, what is it, like 60% of the games. As in, when you have a day where you win all 10 games in a row, unless you've just started on a new Smurf account, that is an extremely unlikely scenario and shouldn't happen based on the MMR. And you got lucky that day probably, or had just a fantastic run, a streak of good games. That's unlikely to continue. The system essentially is designed for it not to continue, and that should be considered the outlier. And then the day when you win the 5 games and you could have won that other one, that's more like your reasonable day. That's your day-to-day. So your day-to-day level is your level. It's not, there's no secret real level, true level. It's your day-to-day level. And that's where we see again the insecurity and the fear of people's true level, or having to be forced to face it and consider this and assess it in ladder anxiety. Now, I'm someone, admittedly, who played a lot of games in my youth before there were things like MMR, before there were rankings. You could enter competitions, but if you played normally just for fun, you could be playing people of all different levels all the time. So obviously it was harder to assess levels, etc. But I was so driven to want to get better and so curious about what made people better and so harsh in as much as all I cared about was getting better. So I was trying to eliminate all the things about my own play that weren't satisfactory and improve upon things that I knew I was good at compared to the person I'm playing with, but I'm not even close to as good as some of these amazing players. That I did do a lot of soul searching, a lot of reflection, and through my own life and philosophy did get to a position whereby, yeah, I am someone who can say I've never felt ladder anxiety. When I've played games that had ladders, I have never felt anxiety to play ladders. In fact, I've gone the other way. Oftentimes in games that had matchmaking functions, and they had fun versions as well, like casuals, like normals in League of Legends, I actually, funnily enough, very rarely used to use those modes because I wanted the more competitive mode. I wanted even my fun games to be hard. I wanted the people to give me a test to really challenge me. So as a result, my real level is lower in as much as I'm willing to be ranked lower in some of these games than I could be if I just played in my perfect mood and when I mastered all these aspects and I went and played a lot of games to warm up, because I don't care if my real level isn't that high. I'm trying to improve at the game. I'm not thinking that. So I've never had anxiety in that way. And so I think people who do have it are scared to face the fact that when they play the game, they're worried they'll lose, right? And lose those points. Guess what? The reason why you lose those points and what's likely to happen, you're not as good as you think you are. You might actually, at the moment, the more like anxiety you feel, odds are you're either very bad and you're unwilling to play more and improve, and you know that something, I'm not as good as I think I am, it's hurting my feelings, or even worse, you've gotten lucky, you've gotten ranked higher than you should be, you're starting to lose some, and you realise if you play more, you will lose more, because guess what? That isn't your real level. The anxiety is actually life telling you something about your situation that is ridiculous, trying to pierce that veil of delusion. Now, there's a great Bruce Lee quote, and this is going to tie into what I said there about working on the fundamentals. Sure, many people have heard it before. It said, "I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times." Now, the point I'm making here is most people in games who have this delusion, who think they're much better than they are, what happens is, they learn the basics of the game. They learn each little aspect. And when I say learn, I mean they just acquaint themselves with it. And they get the basics of it down. They can sort of do it like 60 or 70% of how much you're supposed to do it. And then they learn all of it. And then they say, right, everyone can do that. That happens. Don't need to think too much about that. I've learned that. I know what I'm doing there. And then they think, right, what are the really hard parts of the game? Really like aiming or using this champion or playing this certain way. And they just try to play the game and they try to do everything at once. And they try to be the best in every little area they want to in some sense. But they just try to. They don't work on it. They don't train on it. They don't train on the very fundamental, simple beginner aspects of the game, even though those are the pyramid from which the other parts become easier and from which you build out mastery in your skill sets in all these games. So the point in the Bruce Lee example is, if you work on this one kick 10,000 times, assuming you're not an idiot, totally impervious to improvement and delusional, you're going to get very good at that one kick. Meanwhile, the guy who learns 10,000 kicks once, he's going to have this great repertoire of kicks, right? None of them are going to be that good, though. They're not going to be as good as they could be. They're not going to be as good as he could be in each of those kicks separately if he focuses himself on each one. So in this sense, master the fundamentals of your game and your level will be based on them. That's what I want you to do. Master the fundamentals of the game. Base your level on those fundamentals, how good they are, and you'll start to get a much more accurate view of your game. And you'll start to see that sometimes those higher level plays are less relevant, and you actually win the game based on how good your fundamentals were in this particular area. So, for the games League of Legends and Counter-Strike Global Offensive, I'll give you some examples of fundamentals you can work on. League of Legends, the first fundamental, in fact, the only one I'm going to bring up, is farming. Now, people are immediately going to think, well, come on, man, I can do that. Everyone can do farming. It's very simple. Yeah, I've had games where I had really good rate, I got like 10 CS per minute, 9 CS per minute, whatever it might be. So few people are really good at farming. Very few people are even close to perfect. So few people are even good at farming. I've watched a lot of pro players, watched a lot of players in solo queue. So few people are actually good at it. A lot of them are just satisfactory, or they're okay in a game, or they can be good for a game depending on the matchup. Yet this is the most fundamental aspect of League of Legends. Now, part of the reason for why people are so bad at it is they don't practice versus bots. Again, they think, why would I play versus bots? I can play versus humans. It'll be more fun. There are Korean elite level pros who practice against bots sometimes, just to practice the basics and get all the timings down. Why do you think they do it and you don't have to? They do it because it helps them, because it's another regimented aspect of training, because it's a ritual that they embrace, it's a habit, it's a way to get day to day up to a certain level and tweak your skills. Likewise, people don't focus enough on farming. They're too eager to have a fight. It's more entertaining, it's more exciting, it's more unexpected. They think, oh, if I fight and I get a kill, who cares about if I had like 3 CS less on him or whatever. Despite the fact this is a more fundamental aspect of the game than fighting, than trying to look for engagements, than trying to outplay the enemy with some crazy play. Just killing those minions is a more fundamental aspect. So farming ultimately is too boring for most people. They think it's more fun to fight. Also, when they do try to farm, it's a pretty harsh wake-up call when you just try to farm in a game. You suddenly realise your focus isn't as good as you think it is. You're missing one here, and then that makes you miss one here. And you're thinking about this, you don't get that one there, but you're trying to focus on it, right? So why aren't you doing such a good job? Oh, fuck, what's going on? I'm just having a bad game, and it's stressing me out, and besides, who cares about that few CS? They quickly realise when they do this how far they are from mastery of this fundamental, simple component of the game. There's a great Froggen story, okay? So, me, Froggen, and someone else were having a discussion. And this person was talking to Froggen, and they were saying to him, like, I don't know how, but whenever I played against you, I would be playing. I think the game would seem to be going normally. Things were happening in the game, and then every time I would check, it didn't look like you'd done anything. But suddenly you'd be up 10 CS, you'd be up 20 CS. I'm like, how the fuck is this guy doing it? We're both just farming, we're both just playing. How is he always up to 10, 20 CS? And what's funny is Froggen said, this is something that I've noticed is strange about me compared to other people, is that so many of the mid laners I've played would kill the wave, kill the minions really quickly, push the wave in, and then go take some action, or try to attack me and harass me, whatever it might be. And all I would do was, I would try to safely last hit all the creeps. I would just try to get all the CS that I could. That's all I would focus on. Try not to waste any, try not to waste my abilities, unless it was definitely to get the CS and secure it. And so in doing so, I'd just gradually creep ahead. And then they'd be doing all these things, and I'd just gradually keep creeping ahead. Because remember, 15 CS, not that many over like a 10-minute period, right? 15 CS is the gold for a kill. So you don't have to risk something. You don't have to fight in this way. You don't have to outskill someone, outplay someone. If you can get 15 CS up on them, you have the money that would be equivalent to a kill, the gold. This is a simple, in fact, it's the simplest way, ultimately, to improve at League of Legends, to gain advantages in the game, so to get ahead in the game, to grind back into a game where you've been killed, for example, get 15 CS and you might be near to that level. Not entirely, because you can spend it on gold, spend the gold on an item, obviously, but you see the basic concept. And to win with losing matchups. If you're better at CSing, suddenly it might not be a losing matchup in certain senses, if you're not going to fight. Now, in CSGO, the ultimate example of fundamentals to me, I'm not even going to say firing, I'm going to say positioning. Because if you positioning is about taking good angles, efficient angles, effective angles. When you take good angles, you're going to increase your chances. You're going to make your shots easier. You're going to make it so you read the game better because you're in the right spot at the right time. You've got to be able to adapt within that. So you've got to have good angles, and then you've got to learn the reasons to move from one angle to another. Not just randomly, not just doing it at a whim, not just doing it because you know you can do it now and you won't be punished for it. Doing it because you understand the reason why this position was correct, and then why it's the right decision to move to another, or a good decision or a productive decision to move to another area. Likewise, playing your angle with appropriate aggression, not pushing too much pointlessly, not trying to just dominate the game as though you're the best player in the world, playing the position appropriately and maximizing, making it very efficient, like Crims does for Fnatic. Not taking angles which will work and will punish lesser level opponents, but will build in you a bad habit, a bad impulse, an inability to read the game subtly. That means when you play against better opponents, it won't work and you will be punished, or you'll be just an average player. Don't be someone who is proud of their best games, who is proud of what they think of as their potential. Be someone who's proud of the hard work they've put in, of the training that they put in now, day to day, and their day-to-day training level of the fundamentals. Then you'll have a good sense of how good you are. Be proud of your average game. If you play 50 games, ignore the 10 that are amazing, where everything goes right. Ignore the 10 where things go to shit completely, you're utterly terrible. Take the 30 that are all around the middle and make those your real level, your game. Draw a line through it and say, that's my real level, that's who I am. 50 games, remember, not 10, and then you just take the middle 3 or 4, because that's too small a sample size. 50, and the middle 30, that's who you are. And the excuses don't count when we're talking about 30 games out of 50. And if you can perform consistently well over that, now you're starting to get good. Now you're starting to get to a point where you're at a high level, but still don't count those top 10 one. Go, well, that one I beat a guy who's 2 ranks above me and it's other. No, it's always about your fundamentals. It's always about the average game. Accept your real level. Assess your real level, then improve by working on the fundamentals and see how your real level increases, and you don't have anxiety, you don't have this, because your pride and your enjoyment of the game, your satisfaction is based on something real, and you're able to work on that, something tangible, and you can see how you can improve. So there's no reason to be afraid.